Washington, D.C. was on edge. It had been weeks since whispers began to swirl through the marble halls of the Capitol about something big brewing in Fulton County. Fani Willis, the controversial district attorney from Georgia, had launched a legal assault that many saw as a politically motivated attack. Her target? Associates close to the sitting president of the United States, Donald J. Trump. Cable networks buzzed with speculation. The mainstream media celebrated her moves, calling her the last line of defense for democracy. But others saw it differently. A growing number of Americans believed that Fani was using the justice system as a weapon, a pawn in the larger game of Democrat lawfare. At the Department of Justice, one woman wasn't having it. Pam Bondi, the new United States Attorney General appointed by President Trump during his second term, had made it clear during her confirmation hearing, justice will no longer be weaponized. Pam wasn't new to political warfare. As the former Attorney General of Florida, she had taken on massive pharmaceutical giants, corrupt local officials, and liberal media pressure. But this time was different. This wasn't about politics anymore. It was about the soul of American justice. On a brisk Monday morning, a classified internal memo circulated through the Department of Justice. Its contents were clear: investigate misuse of prosecutorial discretion in the Fulton County DA's office. Whispers turned to roars. Cable news pundits exploded. But Bondi stayed silent, calm, collected, and preparing. In Georgia, Fani Willis brushed off the memo. Speaking at a public event in Atlanta, she scoffed, "Pam Bondi wants to come after me? Bring it. I have the people of Georgia behind me." Behind closed doors, however, her office was in chaos. A former assistant DA had turned whistleblower. Documents had leaked. Emails revealed potential coordination with political operatives tied to major Democrat donors. Meetings that were supposed to be confidential had been held in D.C. hotels with known liberal strategists. And now Bondi had everything she needed to move forward. A press conference was called for Friday morning. The nation waited. When the cameras rolled, Bondi stood at the podium, flanked by legal advisors and investigators. "What we have uncovered in the past few weeks," she began, "is not only alarming, it's un-American." She laid it all out: the emails, the whistleblower statements, the political connections. Names were named. Timelines were shown. Receipts, as the internet would later meme, were brought. This is not justice. This is not prosecution. This is persecution for political gain, Bondi thundered. Fani Willis has brought disgrace to her office. She has used her position not to pursue truth but to chase headlines. And today we say no more. Fulton County exploded in protest. Some rallied behind Willis. Others, shocked by the revelations, called for her resignation. But the biggest twist came moments after the press conference ended. Pam Bondi revealed that federal charges could be filed. "This isn't just about Georgia," she said. "This is about protecting every American from political retaliation disguised as legal action. And we are just getting started." The political world shook. Bondi had gone nuclear. And Fani Willis? She wasn't ready for what was coming. The next 24 hours after Bondi's press conference were pure chaos. Mainstream media outlets scrambled to control the narrative. Left-leaning analysts tried to discredit the whistleblower, calling it another partisan stunt. But Bondi had anticipated this. Her team released a redacted affidavit, signed under oath, that outlined the timeline of internal corruption inside Fani Willis's office. The whistleblower, Christopher Darnell, a mid-level assistant district attorney who had worked directly under Willis for 3 years. A registered Democrat, Darnell wasn't politically motivated. He believed in justice, and what he saw behind closed doors terrified him. The affidavit outlined how Fani's office had allegedly coordinated with outside political groups and strategists months before her indictments. Text messages revealed conversations with political advisors discussing the timing of charges to maximize damage to conservative figures close to Trump. One damning message from Fani herself read, "If we drop this in late October, it'll bury their momentum heading into the midterms." It was a bombshell. Within hours, Bondi's office leaked additional documents, billing records from high-powered Democratic consultants, some of whom had been quietly paid with discretionary funds from the DA's office budget, funds meant for community safety programs. The internet lit up. Hashtag Fanigate trended nationwide. Conservatives roared in vindication. Independents looked on with confusion and concern. Even some moderate Democrats couldn't defend it. Bondi didn't stop there. She had directed her DOJ task force to launch an inquiry into other coordinated prosecutions around the country. But the Fulton County case? That was ground zero. And so, she summoned Fani Willis to Washington for a closed-door deposition. Willis, defiant as ever, refused. That night, on Fox News, Bondi appeared on Tucker Carlson's primetime show. "This is what happens when prosecutors become activists," she told Tucker. "We don't get to cherry-pick justice based on our politics." Fani Willis crossed that line. "And we're going to hold her accountable, in court if we must." Meanwhile, Fani's inner circle was crumbling. A senior investigator in her office resigned, citing irreconcilable ethical concerns. Rumors swirled that another aide was negotiating immunity in exchange for testimony. The Georgia state legislature, under mounting public pressure, announced a special committee to review the conduct of the Fulton County DA. Even Governor Brian Kemp, who had often clashed with Trump, issued a statement calling the allegations deeply troubling. But perhaps the most telling moment came when CNN's usually combative Jake Tapper grilled a Democratic strategist on air. "You say this is all just political theater. But are you saying the documents, the emails, the whistleblower, they're all fake?" The strategist stumbled. There was no answer. Back in D.C., Pam Bondi continued working behind the scenes. She wasn't after headlines. She was after justice. And she was building a case that went deeper than anyone imagined. Because the rot wasn't just in Fulton County. Bondi's team had uncovered communications that linked Fani's office to operatives tied to groups in New York, California, and even D.C. There was a pattern, a playbook, a coordinated effort to target political opponents using the court system. And Bondi was about to expose it all. As Americans watched in disbelief, one thing became clear. This wasn't just about Fani Willis anymore. This was about a war on lawfare. And Pam Bondi had just fired the first shot. It was a moment nobody thought would happen. After relentless pressure from media, lawmakers, and legal experts, Fani Willis finally agreed to appear before the House Committee on Justice Oversight in Washington, D.C. Though she wasn't legally compelled to attend, yet, she knew that skipping the hearing would send a dangerous signal, especially with public sentiment shifting fast. The hearing was set for Thursday morning at 10 a.m., and the whole country tuned in. The halls of the Capitol were buzzing with anticipation. Cameras lined the corridors, journalists whispered into phones, and aides hustled between offices. Everyone wanted to see the clash between two powerful women, Fani Willis, now embattled and defensive, and Pam Bondi, the woman tearing down the facade of justice politics fusion. Fani walked into the hearing room with a calculated air of confidence. Dark navy suit, chin high, eyes scanning the room. She was flanked by two attorneys. She took her seat, placed her hand on the table, and gave a half-smile to the cameras. And then Pam Bondi entered. No entourage, no theatrics, just a large folder under her arm labeled Classified Evidence. Operation Integrity. The chairman called the hearing to order. After the formalities, Bondi was handed the floor. What followed was less like a courtroom debate and more like a surgical dissection. "Ms. Willis," Bondi began, "can you confirm or deny that your office communicated with political consultants in the months leading up to your high-profile indictments?" Fani squirmed. "My office consults with many advisors to ensure our decisions are well-grounded." "That's not what I asked," Bondi cut in coolly. "Did you or did you not coordinate with non-legal political advisors, some of whom were paid with taxpayer dollars?" Gasps rippled through the gallery. Fani's face hardened. "That's under review. Let me help refresh your memory," Bondi interrupted again. She opened her folder and pulled out an enlarged screenshot, an internal memo time-stamped and signed, from a senior strategist on Fani's campaign team. The message read, "Per Fani's request, schedule media interviews for her after the indictment announcement. Let's make sure CNN gets it first." The room went dead silent. A murmur began to grow. Even members of the committee shifted in their seats. Bondi wasn't done. "Is it standard prosecutorial practice, Ms. Willis, to coordinate media appearances before filing charges?" Fani opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She leaned toward her lawyer, who whispered quickly. Her hands fidgeted. Bondi pressed again. Are you prepared to answer under oath whether political gain influenced your prosecutorial discretion? This time, Fani responded firmly. I have nothing to hide, but I won't be part of a political witch hunt. Pam leaned forward, her voice low and sharp. You already are, and the American people see right through it. As gasps filled the chamber again, Bondi reached into her folder once more and pulled out a signed affidavit from the second whistleblower, a former deputy investigator who claimed that evidence was deliberately withheld to ensure indictments would stick, regardless of merit. Bondi laid the documents on the desk in front of her and simply said, We are submitting these into the official record. That was the moment the tide turned. The tension in the room was electric. Lawmakers from both sides stared at Fani with growing concern. Cameras zoomed in on her face, which had gone pale. Outside, media networks began broadcasting clips instantly. Twitter exploded. Pam Bondi had done more than just grill a prosecutor. She had shattered the illusion of nonpartisan justice in Fulton County. And Fani Willis? She was out of moves. But Bondi wasn't finished. The storm was only getting started. The fallout from the hearing was nuclear. Within 48 hours, mainstream outlets could no longer ignore the gravity of the situation. CNN and MSNBC, though initially dismissive, now cautiously acknowledged the mounting evidence. Headlines read, Fani Willis faces scrutiny after explosive DC testimony. Pam Bondi unveils evidence of political prosecution in Fulton County. Social media turned into a war zone. While hardcore partisans dug their heels in, independents and moderates, the pulse of American public opinion, were stunned. Many had believed in the rule of law, trusted the system. But now they were watching it rot from the inside out. And just when it seemed things couldn't get worse for Fani Willis, they did. On a crisp Monday morning, Pam Bondi stood before the press outside the Department of Justice and delivered a brief, pointed statement. The Department of Justice has opened an official investigation into potential misuse of public funds, political targeting, and obstruction of justice within the Fulton County District Attorney's office. This office will not tolerate the weaponization of our legal system for political gain. The media erupted. And then the leak came. An anonymous source from within the DOJ revealed to reporters that sealed indictments were being prepared against multiple officials within Fani's office, including her chief investigator, communications director, and even a campaign finance manager. These weren't just low-level scapegoats. They were her inner circle. The charges? Conspiracy to interfere with official proceedings, fraudulent use of public resources, and obstruction of justice. In response, Fani Willis's legal team filed an emergency motion to quash the federal probe, arguing it was politically motivated and outside the DOJ's jurisdiction. Bondi's response was swift. She released an 18-page memo publicly outlining how federal laws had been violated, complete with legal precedents, funding documentation, and excerpts from whistleblower interviews. Her memo concluded, "This is not about politics. This is about protecting the American judicial system from becoming a weapon in the hands of those who swore to uphold it." It was impossible to argue with. Fani's team began to fracture under pressure. Her once loyal chief investigator, Raymond Culver, resigned abruptly and then disappeared from public view. A week later, news broke that Culver had flipped, entering into a plea deal and testifying under oath that Fani personally instructed the team to suppress exculpatory evidence in politically sensitive cases. The deal? Limited immunity in exchange for full cooperation. The walls were caving in. Meanwhile, congressional Republicans launched their own bipartisan subcommittee to explore lawfare practices across various state and local jurisdictions. Some centrist Democrats joined in. Their constituents were furious and they knew it. Pam Bondi's popularity soared. She wasn't grandstanding. She wasn't running for anything. She was just doing the job that too many had abandoned. Even President Donald Trump, who had stayed largely silent on the drama, finally weighed in during a rally in Pennsylvania. Pam Bondi, she's a hero, folks. She's doing what nobody else had the guts to do. She's showing them all that justice is not for sale. The crowd roared. By now, Fani Willis was barely holding onto her office. Protesters gathered outside her Atlanta headquarters. Her legal team was tied up in federal filings. Media requests were being ignored. Her name was synonymous with the very corruption she claimed to fight. And yet Bondi wasn't celebrating. Because she knew this wasn't just about one DA in Georgia. This was about a national reckoning. The system had been twisted slowly and deliberately by people who thought they'd never be caught. But they were wrong. And Pam Bondi was just getting started. 3 weeks after the DC hearing, the Justice Department officially issued subpoenas to 5 top aides in the Fulton County District Attorney's office. 2 days later, the bombshell dropped. Fani Willis herself was under criminal investigation. For the first time, her face appeared on screens not as a bold prosecutor, but as a suspect. Every channel, from Fox to even reluctant CNN anchors, carried the same cheerin'. Fulton County DA facing possible indictment in DOJ probe led by Pam Bondi. America was watching history unfold. A once powerful DA, who tried to project herself as a crusader for justice, was now backed into a corner, facing the very consequences she had once so confidently promised to deliver to others. Meanwhile, Bondi moved quietly but powerfully. Instead of victory laps, she assembled a special task force inside the DOJ titled Office of Judicial Integrity. Its mission? To investigate and prevent political abuse within local and state judicial systems. She worked late hours, refused interviews. Her focus remained one thing: accountability. But it was her unexpected primetime address that truly shook the nation. Broadcast live from the National Press Club in Washington, Bondi stood before a crowd of reporters, legal scholars, and everyday Americans. She looked directly into the camera and spoke not like a prosecutor, but like a patriot. "This is not about Republicans versus Democrats," she said. "This is about the soul of American justice. When elected officials begin using courtrooms to silence political opponents, when prosecutors target citizens not based on evidence but ideology, when the legal process becomes a political stunt, our republic suffers." Fani Willis is not the first, and she won't be the last. But make no mistake, she is a symbol of a deeper sickness, and we must treat it at the root. She paused, letting her words sink in. The law is not a weapon. It is a shield, and it's our duty to make sure it protects everyone, not just those in power. The room erupted in applause. Even some former critics, left-leaning outlets and pundits were forced to admit Pam Bondi had become a national figure of justice reform. In Georgia, the storm reached its peak. With mounting legal pressure, public outrage, and her inner circle collapsing, Fani Willis finally resigned from office in disgrace. Her statement, short and defensive, read, "I have served with honor. This is a politically motivated attack, and history will judge fairly." But the damage was done. Her resignation wasn't seen as a defense. It was an admission. Almost immediately, lawsuits were filed by defendants who had been caught up in her indictments. Some accused her of malicious prosecution. Others demanded retrials. The legal system began to recalibrate. Bondi, ever calm and calculated, released a final report titled Justice Restored, the Fulton County Files. It detailed how political strategy consultants had shaped legal decisions, how media was coordinated with indictments, and how real evidence had been ignored in the name of optics. The report was shared in every law school, downloaded over 3 million times in 72 hours, and cited by federal judges across the country. America was waking up. The pendulum was swinging back toward balance. And though Bondi refused to run for office, the grassroots movement she sparked began demanding new ethics boards, transparency laws, and watchdog groups across the nation. Some said it was a revolution in slow motion. And it started with a single woman who stood up and said, "Enough."